give thanks for that, but, this idea of using sound for healing is ancient, whether it's going back to the ancient Egyptians or Pythagoras or whatnot. This whole concept of using sound as a healing modality is very, very ancient. And for about the first 20 years that I was, I really got that my purpose was to help bring to the planet awareness of how sound could be used for healing. And then about 10 years ago, I was in a really deep state of meditation. And I asked whatever beings or energies or entities that I work with, I said, okay, well, have I completed what I'm supposed to do? Is it time for me to move to Tahiti, get my comic book and my guitar and my wife and just have a good old time on the beach? And that would have been okay with me, Jay, but I got as an answer, no, what you simply must do is take your focus of attention, continue working on personal sound healing, but add the concept of planetary sound healing. And I went, whoa, what's that? And I said, okay, well, basically what it is just basically what I was just telling you about, using sound in groups of people throughout the planet in order to change and shift the vibratory rate of the planet and the consciousness of the planet for better.
Well, the drums of Mickey Hart and Zakir Hussain interrupt us with their own form of sonic healing. So I think you ought to piggyback this idea onto 2012, but we'll get back to that in a second. We're going to take a break here. We'll be back in a couple minutes. I'm Jay Weidner, and we're talking to the sonic Jonathan Goldman, who brings us the Nama Rama. We'll be right back. And we're back. We're back with Jonathan Goldman. I'm Jay Weidner. We're having a good time. I figure we might as well rock and roll while we're here. Rock and roll's music too, and it's a healing sound, isn't it?
Oh, you betcha. When I first got into this whole thing, there was all this. And we're talking about, once again, 30 years ago, Jay, and there was a lot of bad PR about rock and roll, and I, put down my electric guitar for a number of years until I, came to the realization that it wasn't only the sound or any particular genre, but it was actually the energy and the intention of the people who were, creating the music. And if you think about it, to me, some of the most light-filled, love-filled music on the planet was created by the Beatles. And in fact, last night, my wife Andy and I were watching this show on PBS about how, in reality, the Soviet Union fell not because of politics, but because of the Beatles. And the Beatles actually, through their music, through the mystery school of their music, if you like, because it was banned, et cetera, and illegal in the Soviet Union, they were able to basically plant these seeds of, if you like, freedom-thinking people, and that was the thing that ultimately caused the downfall of the Soviet Union. It was mind-boggling, something I'd never perceived before.
Yeah, I can see that, and of course we can't forget what happened to our own country in the '60s with Bob Dylan and a lot of those things causing trouble at every corner. So you can see music does have this kind of weird effect on the mind, and you're right about intention. That's why I can't listen to heavy metal, for instance. It just, I can feel the harmful intentions and just drives me crazy. But there's a lot of music I love. I like all music really in some way or another, and I really can see how powerful it is, and I really appreciate the fact that you're bringing this up to the to the forefront of knowledge, and people are using it now to heal themselves as we get into the what we call here the fourth turning, which is this revolutionary period that the United States is going through and will continue to go through. Every day we're going to need to find a way to calm ourselves down in the torrent of what is going to be going on around us. And it's not just 2012. It's beyond that. It's a shakedown of the entire society, and it's really actually inevitable. So things like what Jonathan is teaching are going to become extremely important as we approach this kind of nerve-wracking time period where a new consciousness emerges out of this old paradigm, which is falling away, thankfully. And so what do you have to say about that, Jonathan? Can it help us?
Well, Jay, it's interesting. I've got about a gazillion stories, and if we had about 5 hours to just have a conversation back and forth, going from metal and the fact that every type of music, even heavy metal, has its own purpose. It may not be real resonant with you or I, but perhaps someone who's 16 years old and likes the sound of a buzzsaw, but
I like it then.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's interesting. We're different. We have a whole different hormonal system as we grow older, et cetera. But getting back to 2012 and getting back, there is a new book by a fellow by the name of Dan Brown, who wrote the Da Vinci Code. Now, I was real pleased with the Da Vinci Code because one of my recordings, called The Lost Chord, was basically all done in a ratio called 5 that I know that you are aware of, but at the time that we did it, nobody had ever heard of 5. And then Dan Brown spent about, 5 pages in the Da Vinci Code talking about Leonardo da Vinci and the Vitruvian Man and the phi ratio, and all of a sudden I could be doing a talk with people and say, well, these tuning forks are tuned to the phi ratio, or this thing is the phi ratio, and as opposed to having what is called a flyby, where you would say something, you could just see the thought flying by the people's consciousness, people kind of look at me. I say, well, you all saw or read the Da Vinci Code, didn't you? And everybody would smile and nod, and I go, okay, well, that's the phi ratio. So anyway, the new book is called The Lost Symbol. And what I think is so important for this, because it's reaching mainstream consciousness, is that the very first chapter and the very last chapter in particular focus upon not the phi ratio, but something called noetic sciences. And they talk about the Global Consciousness Project, which is, I'm sure you've spoken about this with your audience, but very, very briefly. Well, the Global Consciousness Project out of Princeton, New Jersey, has a number of random number generators. And what are random number generators? They're like computers that generate random numbers. And they have about 40 of these spread throughout the planets. But what they found is that during times of great compassion, great compassionate experiences, the numbers on the random number generator become less random. And they're able to actually chart them. They're actually able to make a chart during events of great compassion. Now, Jay, we're not talking about events of great excitement, like something like the Super Bowl or something like that. That doesn't do it. But something of great positivity or, unfortunately, great negativity, such as the great sympathy and pity that people felt from a tsunami, created this, basically waveform that could be charted. And it's quite remarkable. And the fact that Dan Brown writes about this in his book is very important, because he talks about how our combined intention. You need to cut to a break.
We do.
All right.
We're going to come back, talk about Dan Brown, sound healing, the new consciousness. We're talking to Jonathan Goldman, Healing Sounds with an S.com. I'm Jay Weidner. We'll be right back. Smoke and Mirrors Radio Hour.